Hi, everyone. Death records are one of those types of records that we all try to find for all of our ancestors. They give us such great information, but sometimes we just can't find them. Hi, I'm Amy Johnson Crow, and I'm here to give you some tips, tricks, and some encouragement to help you find your family history. Right now, we're talking about death records. Specifically, why you sometimes can't find them. It turns out that there are really 5 pretty common reasons why you might not be finding the death records that you're expecting to find. One reason is maybe they weren't keeping death records then. It's easy to forget that not every location started keeping civil death records at the exact same time. And when I say civil death records, I mean the ones that are kept by the government, the ones that are kept like in a county probate court or a clerk of courts or a Department of Health, someplace like that. That's a civil death record. Well, in Ohio, we started keeping civil death records in the probate courts in 1867. But Indiana didn't start until like 1882, and Pennsylvania started much later than that. So if you're going into searching for a death record and not thinking about, well, when did this location even start keeping the records, you could be setting yourself up for some frustration. Because if I'm trying to find a civil death record for my ancestor in Ohio and they died in 1847, I'm kind of sunk because Ohio wasn't keeping civil death records at that time. So, what can we do about that? Well, obviously, we can't find a record that wasn't created to begin with, but think about the information that you want to get from that death record. And think about the records that could give you that same information. So, if I'm thinking about my ancestor who died in 1847, well, maybe I want to find his tombstone and find those related cemetery records. What about a church record? What about an obituary? What about his probate? Thinking about later records, maybe a military pension record. And it's possible that I'll never find a record that actually spells out his exact date of death. But by using these other records, I can probably get it narrowed down to, a pretty close time period. So that's reason number one that you might not be finding that death record. It might be that it was never created to begin with because that location wasn't keeping the records then. So the second reason that you might not be finding those death records is he didn't die where you think he did. I mean, our ancestors can be really inconsiderate sometimes. They don't always do things where we expect them to. The thing with death records is that the record is based, almost always, on the location of the death, not the location where the person was typically living. So think about your ancestors who lived in a county and maybe they're near the county border. Well, could that ancestor have died on the other side of the county line? Well, that death record then would be in that other county. But also think about the possibility of, did your ancestor move? As the children grew up and they moved away, they scattered perhaps across the country. Is it possible that that ancestor that you can't find his or her death record, maybe it's because he or she was actually living with one of their adult children in another location? So when you have this situation where you just can't find that ancestor's death record, start tracing their children and figure out where they were living about the time that you think that ancestor died. And bonus tip, focus first on the married daughters. It is so common for our elderly ancestors to have moved in with one of their married daughters. So if you can track them and look in the death records for those areas, okay, you might be able to find some more of those death records that you hadn't been able to find previously because they didn't die where you expected them to. Now we're up to reason number 3. She's using a different name. And I do say she because this particular reason is kind of specific to women. It isn't unusual to see the death record of a woman, and she's not listed as Mary Smith. She's listed on her death record as Mrs. John Smith. So if you are having difficulty finding her when you're searching for her name, try searching with her husband's name instead. And while we're on the subject of trying to find those records for women, think about all of her marriages. Her death record should, and I probably should put should in air quotes, her death record should be using the last name that she was using at the time. So if you've been searching for her with her maiden name or her first married name, but she was married again later, you really need to be thinking about what is that name that she was using at the time that she died. So again, that's something that's specific to women. It can be a little bit of a challenge, especially if you have an ancestor like I have, Matilda DeBolt Skinner Crossan Brown McFillin. For the longest time, I could not find what happened to her because I wasn't sure actually if she had been married again after that last one that I knew of. So I did finally find her, and she did die with that last surname of McFillin. But it shows you have to keep track of all of her marriages in order to be able to track down her death record later. Reason number 4, he's using initials. And we do see this more with men than we do with women. William Henry Starkey might show up on his death record as W.H. Starkey. I don't know why they decided to do this, but it just seemed to be sort of in vogue for men to use their initials rather than their given names. This turns out to be a problem when we're searching, especially online, because if we're searching for William Henry Starkey, but his death record says W.H. Starkey, how we did that search for William Henry might not reveal that death record, even though he has one. Now, on some of the larger genealogy sites like Ancestry or Family Search, when you do a search and you do include the full first name, I know Ancestry and Family Search both try to give results that include just those initials. But when you're working with a smaller website, perhaps a local genealogy society or a public library, it might not have that search capability, that flexibility built into their search. So it might not automatically give you WH when you searched for William Henry. So try switching up your search strategies. Maybe you even leave out that first name entirely and just use the surname and a date of death. All right, so that kind of ties in with the 5th reason that you might not be finding that death record, and that is he's using a nickname or a middle name. Our ancestors, their names were a lot more fluid than what we would tend to think of. That William Henry Starkey, well, it's possible that at some point in his life he just went by Henry. So If you've been searching for him as William Starkey or William Henry Starkey, you might not find him if his death record is listed simply as Henry Starkey. So play around with just searching with the middle name or searching with a nickname. Now, for adult men, it isn't quite as common to see a nickname being used. So if he was William, it's not quite as common to see an adult male with a death record that would say Bill or Billy. For women, it actually is a little bit more common. So a Catherine might show up as a Katie or a Kate. But it's very common actually to see nicknames appear when we're talking about death records for children. So if you're trying to find the death record of a child and you're not finding them when you search for their full sort of proper first name, think about what nicknames might have been used. If he was a William, could he be appearing as a Bill or a Billy, Will or Willie? Thinking about Catherine's, is she a Kate? Is she a Katie? If she's Margaret, is she actually Peggy? If she's Sarah, is she showing up as Sally? So becoming familiar with nicknames can also help you pull out other records because you're starting to see, oh, these names can be equivalent. All right. So do think about those nicknames, especially when you're looking for women or when you're looking for the death record of a child. I hope that these are helpful, and I hope that you go out and make some wonderful discoveries in your family tree. Thanks for watching, and happy researching. Bye, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, click that subscribe button and hit that bell so YouTube will notify you every time that I post a new video. Also, feel free to check out my website at amyjohnsoncrow.com. Happy researching!